Guys, we may already be in a recession. We don't get the official news for a few weeks, but we may already be there. I'm going to show you the updated data and what you should do about it. That and more coming up. My name is Mike Bernard. I'm the host of the Wise Money Show. I'm also one of the certified financial planners right here at Korhorn Financial Group. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and smash that thumbs up button. All right, guys, we might already be in a recession. I can't believe I'm saying that. If you've been listening, if you're a daily listener of the Wise Money Show, first, thank you. And second, I mean, you've likely heard the tone in my voice really from about the beginning of the year to, wow, you know, we're seeing some recessionary signs, some signals. It seems really unlikely that we'll go from insatiable demand to a contraction in the economy, but we'll see. Then it got more and more like, hey, we could be on the heels of a recession. And then all of a sudden, when the first quarter GDP numbers came out, which by the way, it typically come out 4 weeks after the end of a quarter. So you don't really know until at least a month afterwards whether, you know, where things were at in the economy. I'll get more to that in just a second. When that surprisingly came out where first quarter GDP contracted, it was, okay, wow. I mean, this seems unlikely that we're already in it. Maybe this is just a sign that we're getting very close. Now, if you wanted a better sense of whether we're in a recession or really just how is GDP going in real time, it's not a perfect system, but the indicator or the reference point comes out of the Atlanta Fed, their research and their website called GDPNow. Okay, so take a look at it right here. Link is below as well. But GDPNow is their amalgamation of different economic indicators and perspectives to help determine, okay, where do we think GDP is right now? For this quarter, where do we think it's going to be right now? What trend are we at right now? Now, there's lots of disclaimers right there, as you can see, that this is, you know, you shouldn't base decisions based on this, and you shouldn't view this as accurate data. GDP numbers don't come out, and they don't come from this. They don't come out for a few weeks after the quarter end. They don't come from this source. They come from a different source. Blah blah blah. Lots of disclaimers. However, as I've looked at this site, GDPNow, for a while, for several years, it's pretty stinking accurate. It's pretty accurate. In this case, what we're watching is a recession. And why do we care about GDP? For those of you that don't know, a recession isn't just a feeling. It's more than a feeling. Sorry for the terrible joke there. It's actually defined objectively as 2 consecutive quarters of shrinking economy, shrinking GDP, a reduction in growth in our actual economic activity, okay? Now, a different bureau actually comes out with and says, hey, we're officially in a recession. They take other things into consideration. But for the layman, and even, you know, for most in the financial industry, 2 consecutive quarters of contracting GDP, we're in a recession. That's how you define it. So here's what happened, guys. This real story, true story. We saw a surprise contraction, a shrinking in GDP in the first quarter, and we've seen a record number of people Google search the term recession in the month of June. And so as I was working on some of our client communications here at Korhorn Financial Group on the morning of June 30th, I was preparing some remarks about whether we were going to be heading into recession, what are the chances, and I pulled up GDPNow. This was in the morning of June 30th, and GDPNow at that time was forecasting that the second quarter GDP was going to be a meager growth rate of 0.30%. So very tiny amount of growth. And what I was writing was, you know, we'll see that's so close to break even. Wouldn't surprise us if we actually saw things dip negative and we're officially in a recession. Okay, so that was in the morning on June 30th. In the evening on June 30th, I see an article, or I see a headline that references GDPNow actually just updated their forecast of second quarter GDP from that 0.3 percentage point growth to a -1%, a decline. They officially said, based on what we're seeing right now, we're already in a recession. That was just within a couple of hours. You'd think that's enough and the story should end and I'll tell you action items. No, it gets further. On July 1st, GDPNow Atlanta Fed updated again and said, based on most recent data that just came out, we are now updated our second quarter forecast for GDP from a -1 to a -2.1%. Guys, that could be official. You can't, this is not the official word and you can't act on this, blah, 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 but it very possible we are already in that recession. So what does this mean? Is this now time to panic? No, guys, absolutely not. Going back years and years, I just did a video on this, going back almost a century, right? On average, the economy will go into a recession once out of every 4 years, call it, okay? And typically during a recession, the stock market will drop somewhere between 30 to 40%. We've seen a lot of that already. So what this could mean is things could get worse in the stock market before they get better. However, history also says that as soon as the official bureau says we're in a recession, that typically historically has been a great time to buy. Now this one could be more painful potentially, because part of the reason we're seeing inflation is because Russia-Ukraine crisis that stubbornly is keeping some of the input, some of the costs higher. Inflation that's just been pervasive over the past couple of years, likely caused by all the money supply increase and the money printing, all of that sort of stuff. That's not going to be an easy fix. Yeah, by the way, the Fed was supposed to be reducing their balance sheet significantly in the month of June, and they did not do that. By the way, they came in well below what they strongly said, we're going to do this hard thing to control inflation. They didn't do that at all, by the way. And so from inflation, from Russia-Ukraine war and conflict, and what has typically gets us through a recession or helps the market bottom is the Fed starting to accommodate and starting to lower interest rates and print money. They might not be able to do that for a while, right? They might not be able to do that. So this one could get more painful, could take a little bit longer. We will see. But what should you be doing if this is the latest indication, but a strong indication that we're officially in that recession? And I would tell you, number one is to update that budget. Work on that budget. Work on stabilizing your overall financial foundation. Why? Because if your income gets disrupted and you've got to make some adjustments, you are going to want to be able to see where is your money going so that you know how much adjusting or what adjustments you need to make. So that's one, update your budget. But the other thing, second, regarding stabilizing your overall financial foundation is consider living on less right now. If you are looking at your budget saying, well, if I need to make cuts, here's where I'll make cuts. Consider making those cuts right now and building up cash just in case you need it. Or make those cuts now and pay down debt just in case you need it. I mean, there's a record amount of credit card balances right now by consumers. And so if you're hanging on to some credit card debt, find a way to make some cuts now and pay that off. But so update your budget, find out where you can cut, and then two, try to make those cuts right now, build up cash and pay down debt. That will stabilize your overall financial condition. Next, I'd make sure that you're not taking too much risk in your investments. Now is not the time to go from, a lot of risk to no risk. Things could get worse from here, but it'll be challenging, if not impossible, for you to say, oh, for sure, things are going to be lower and I'll be able to buy at the bottom before they bounce back and recover, okay? I would make sure that you're taking the right level of risk, and I'd work with your CFP to even project out the next 2-3 years and say, well, if things don't improve over the next 2 to 3 years, are we still comfortable for this risk level right now, riding us through these next few years? Work with your CFP on that. And then lastly, if you're still in contribution mode, even that is if you're looking to retire in the next few years, but certainly if you're in your 40s, your 30s, your 20s, now could be a generational buying opportunity. It's very possible it gets worse from here. If you just look at history, and I did some videos on this, likely it gets worse from here. But as we get into a recession, typically those are great times looking backwards, great times to be buying stocks. And if you are still in that accumulation phase, won't need to touch these dollars for a couple decades or more, great time. I'd make sure that your new contributions are continuing to go into the stock market. But those are just ideas. You've got to work with your certified financial planner on which of those things make the most sense in your unique financial situation. So work with your CFP on that. See if that makes sense. If you don't have a CFP on your team, you can contact one on my team. Find us online, Korhorn.com. That's Korhorn with a K. WiseMoneyShow.com. You can find us there as well, or give us a call, 574-247-5898. All right, there you have it. Go out and take your next wise step in your financial life.